It is 9:59. Good morning. I'm Lucas Panzica. Justin Thomas trailed at the top of the leaderboard by 7 strokes at the start of the 4th round at the PGA Championship Sunday, but stormed back and birdied twice in a playoff with Will Zalatoris to win at Southern Hills Country Club in Tulsa. It's the second PGA Championship of Thomas's career. The Golden State Warriors have a 3-0 lead in the Western Conference Finals after beating the Mavericks in Dallas 109-100 Sunday night, with a chance to complete the sweep on Tuesday. And in the NHL, the defending champs are one step closer to sweeping the President's Trophy winners in the Battle of Florida. The Lightning took a 3-0 series lead over the Panthers with a 5-1 win on Sunday, and the Rangers beat the Hurricanes 3-1 in Game 3 to win their first game of the series. And in the West, Edmonton got a hat trick from Evander Kane to beat Calgary 4-1 and take a 2-1 series lead in the Battle of Alberta. The Atlanta Braves are 19-22 after taking a weekend series against the Miami Marlins, facing another divisional opponent this week, the Phillies, tonight at home at 6:20. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Good morning. Hope you had a great weekend. Welcome into 104.5 The Zone. Buck Reising here with you until 1 o'clock. Lucas Panzica is back there making it happen. Jump in if you want. 615-737-1045 is how you do the damn thing this morning, and there's a lot of stuff to talk about coming off an interesting sports weekend. We've got some stuff with Steve Spurrier getting into the fray, into the middle of Jimbo and Nick Saban. You've got Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC, threatening them, basically like a disappointed parent, basically telling them that they are going to have to get their act in line before everybody has to go on family vacation in Destin in a couple of weeks for the SEC League meetings. We'll get to that later on in the show. But there was some stuff that happened right around the time that we got on the air on Friday regarding the Titans and their new stadium. So Burke Nihill, who is the president of the Tennessee Titans, went in front of the Metro Sports Authority to kind of detail some of the stuff that they have been working through over the course of the last couple of months, basically to present the argument as to why it makes more sense to move forward with the new stadium as opposed to renovating the old one. And while that was going on, we figured that there would be some interesting stuff to talk about. Maybe nothing that's going to outright grab the eye or be super headline-y, because it's budgetary issues. It's a lot of different numbers, and sometimes that can be dull as conversation. But then, while I was reading the coverage of this, because the meeting was at 9:30 in the morning and we're on the air at 10, so I didn't have the opportunity to attend myself. But I did go back and watch the comments on a YouTube that they had live streamed it on. And so I'd watched some of the coverage around this. I didn't see too many local people covering it. For example, Nate Rao from Axios, who has been on the beat, basically, of the new Titan Stadium updates. Not a lot from him. Teresa Walker had a couple of quotes from Burke Nihill. But this was the thing that I think grabbed most people's attention. It's on Pro Football Talk, where, of course, if you're familiar, Pro Football Talk, an aggregator for all NFL news, ran by Mike Florio, who is a big part of NBC's NFL coverage, Sunday Night Football. He's the founder of Pro Football Talk. He's trained as a lawyer and sometimes has good insights on this, sometimes not. Now, Mike Florio, most famously with Titans fans, was at the head of the pack for basically trying to kick the Titans out of the league for a year during the 2020 season, when they were the first NFL team to get a widespread COVID outbreak. He was talking about millions of dollars in fines, potentially suspending John Robinson and Mike Vrabel for a year or something like that. Like, it was completely out of control. But he wrote a column on the new stadium, on the idea that the Titans want a new stadium. Basically, that they're pushing for a new one and not to refurbish Nissan. It goes on to detail the analysis that the Titans had contracted AECOM, I want to make sure I'm pronouncing that acronym correctly, AECOM Hunt Construction, went through the analysis with the Titans that Nissan Stadium will require $1.2 billion to renovate, with another $900 million in upgrades in order to remain relevant through 2039. Now, you might ask, why does 2039 matter? Well, that's the term of the current lease. I don't know about you, but I have zero interest in seeing games played in Nissan Stadium for an additional 17 years when the place is already a bit of a concrete dump. Now, when it comes to public funding, that's the biggest question around the stadium stuff, right? We have been working with Mayor John Cooper's communication staff to get the mayor in studio here at some point this week when we have an exact day and time. Of course, we'll keep you updated on that, because when last we talked about this, it was Mayor Cooper's op-ed in the Tennessean detailing why, from the city of Nashville's standpoint, a new stadium made sense, but offering certain protections, like the idea that there would be no additional taxes on Davidson County residents for the construction of this, that there would be no great burden on the residents of Davidson County, which is, of course, the thing that most people come to. Now, if you're here at 10 a.m. on a Monday morning, you're probably somebody who is going to be in favor of the stadium. There's a great many people who don't give a damn about sports talk radio, who have no interest in seeing this thing come to fruition. But when the numbers were laid out this way, $1.2 billion to renovate, $900 million in upgrades, additionally, in order to keep this thing up to just basic code. You hold that against what they are projecting, which is somewhere between 1.9 and 2.2 billion for a new shop, and you say the total of 2.1 versus 1.9, between 1.9 and 2.2, yeah, probably just build the new one. Because there's still this burden under the current lease agreement that is on Davidson County, on the Metro Nashville General Fund, which is the whole reason why the city of Nashville feels it's a winning position, because they're trying to get it away from the general fund. We don't want the city of Nashville to have to pay maintenance on this thing that's clearly eroding at its core. Now, there's a lot of this stuff that is going to have to get worked through. And this is the thing that Burke Nihill said in his public comments. The mayor said it last week that, in his opinion, doing nothing is not an option. I think we've seen it that way for 3 or 4 years, because we know that the Titans have been exploring either renovations or new construction for a considerable amount of time prior to this all coming to fruition in the last couple of months, or all coming to the public in the last couple of months, being a part of you and I's discourse around this offseason. It's been honestly a crazy offseason for the Titans. Everything from how the season ended to stadium stuff to AJ's traded to drafting Malik. Like, there's just been a lot of news here locally in the span of 4 short months. And the stadium is probably the biggest thing, the thing that impacts the most amount of people, but the concept of it, the most complicated and with the most layers that we're going to have to work through. So Burke Nihill goes on to say, I think we've seen it that way for 3 or 4 years, probably longer, just understanding that the condition of this building, the increasing NFL standards, and really all standards for building, that we have had to stop plugging holes and come up with a comprehensive solution. So there's a lot of this that I think, is clear and obvious to anybody who regularly attends Titans games. The stadium is not up to par. There's a lot of structural issues with the idea that it is primarily constructed out of concrete. The standard is now steel for construction reasons that are beyond my comprehension. I don't do this for a living, but smart people who do have talked to me about this, or I've tried to talk to as many people around this kind of stuff as humanly possible. to understand just why this is the path that they're going down. Now, for me, I had no concept of just how corroded Nissan Stadium has become until like the last couple of years, because it's a different experience for me than for people who go to games as fans, right? Where there's parking and seating and all these different logistical issues that you got to work through, that I'm just showing up for work about 3 hours before kick. I'm walking to the press box and I don't think about any of this stuff. Until during COVID, they wouldn't let us down on the field, on the playing surface. They were restricting us to the lower bowl for all the pregame purposes, social media. You know, you're taking pictures. Jeffrey Simmons playing today. Laurel Murchison inactive. All these different things that you guys see from us, Titans reporters, on social media before kickoff. So I'm walking around the lower bowl, and all of a sudden, my shoe like catches this weird kind of putty material walking between the sections. Lucas, you ever experienced this? I don't know how many people know what I'm talking about. If you sat in the lower bowl for a Titans game, or really any event, there's this weird kind of gooey stuff that, like, I almost ate it. I almost ate it. And it's all over the stadium.
Just holding it together.
Apparently, it's some kind of, like, concrete patch that doesn't really mold solid at any point. Like, it'll stay there, but it's just like they spackled it together, but the spackle didn't really ever, like, I don't know what the proper term is.
Didn't take.
Hardened. It's just this goop. It's like a legit hazard out there. And that's just like God knows what this thing looks like, you know, if you popped open the hood of Nissan Stadium and looked at all the different structural issues that they're not telling us about. And the larger point is, there's a lot of stuff that is going to have to be worked through. There's going to be opinions on both sides of things. And if you're a sports fan, you'll want it. And if you don't give a damn about sports, you're like, what about all the potholes on 440? Or any number of different things that the city could be addressing to better our existence as Davidson County residents, those of us who are. I know we don't just have listeners in Davidson County. But for the people who are going to bear the burden of this, they want to know where their money is going. Because Florio notes correctly that just by generalizing it with the term public money, we're looking at $1.5 billion. Now, there's several different things that go into that pool. You're talking about hotel motel tax, which we've discussed. You're talking about the $500 million in bonds that the Tennessee state government approved as part of the legislative process. You're talking about all these different things that they're going to be looking at to generate those funds, whether it's, you know, operating with new sponsors who are going to have to pay more money for in-stadium signage, all the different ways that they can squeeze money out of people outside of putting $700 million of their own liquidated assets into the financing of the stadium, them being the Titans ownership group. So this is going to continue to play out over, I don't know what the timeline is, because I had some people sending me the idea that they had agreed to a tentative start date, which I could find nowhere in the reporting. And if you've seen anything to that effect, we'd appreciate some guidance on that. 615-737-1045, because I have not seen anything to that effect. But basically, the way that this was laid out by Mike Florio is the options for Titans fans and Davidson County residents are this: spend a lot of taxpayer money on a new stadium, one, or two, spend a lot of taxpayer money to meet contractual obligations to maintain and upgrade the current stadium. And basically, he's making the case for it's a pit either way for the people who are going to shoulder the burden on this largely. Here's how you're kind of getting screwed. And I think most people who care about sports in this city are looking around and saying, yeah, but we're like good with that. Now, there are some people who are going to protest that, rightfully so. The cost of living in Middle Tennessee, in Nashville specifically, has gone through the roof. And if you're not wanting to dump more of your tax-paying dollars into the new, whatever the new Nissan Stadium ends up being called, I get that. But this seems to be the way that things are trending regardless. And the way that they're laying it out, yeah, it's just picking from the best of bad financing options when it comes to the construction of a new stadium. 615-737-1045 is how you can react to any of this stuff on the Titan Stadium. And some interesting stuff over the weekend from another local stadium that Lucas was at until I think very early into the wee hours of Sunday morning. We'll get into that coming up next.
The Buck Reising Show is powered by Spring Hill Heating and Cooling. Go to springhillac.com.
Indeed. Welcome back. Hope you're having a great day so far. Hope you had a spectacular weekend. I tried to. I really did. I had a big Saturday planned, and then the weather did not cooperate. It's the first time I've been actually upset with the Nashville severe weather people, which I should never be because they saved my life, literally saved my life during the tornado in 2020, but I was frustrated with how the situation played out at Geodis Park on Saturday. Get to that later. In the meantime, we're talking about the Titan Stadium, the latest developments on the new construction project that both the Titans, the state of Tennessee, and the city of Nashville seem to be in favor of. And we talked about how Burke Nihill, the president and CEO of the Titans, went in front of the Metro Sports Authority Council to kind of lay out the case budgetarily as to why this makes more sense and the conversation that we've been having around this. I think it's interesting that people are gravitating towards it, but reacting more off of, what Mike Florio wrote about the Titans stadium situation, because it's an opinion, as opposed to what Burke Nihill laid out in front of the Metro Sports Authority. 615-737-1045 is how you can interact, or on Zone TV. That's Facebook Live, Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. Basically, which a lot of people are pointing out, it comes down to the idea that Nashville's going to pony up money so they can be off the hook for maintaining it, or Nashville continues to foot the bill. So they're saying, yeah, you can either pay it through 2039 and keep this hunk of junk up to date, or up to at least code, if not up to date, or you can give us more money and we'll take that off your hands as the Nashville General Fund taxpayer. John is in Nashville up first. Hello, John.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning to you.
I've been here for years. I voted no against the stadium that's there now for the simple fact it's not a dome. I would rather them have I don't mind paying for it. That's no big deal. But they need to have more than just football there. Why not have a retractable roof or put a dome in that can be used for more than one thing?
Well, John, that's what the state has told them. They said they're only getting the $500 million in bonds if they build some form of a roof, retractable dome or otherwise.
That absolutely, because you can't, if you have a big festival there or something and then the rain comes, everything's canceled. But I agree with the I don't mind paying the money as long as it can be used for more than just that.
Right, and that's what the Titans ownership group is banking on. Thank you for the call, John. 615-737-1045. Now, here's the biggest point of contention, and this is something that I think a lot of fans, whether you're a Titans fan or, when the Vols play at Nissan Stadium, or if they end up playing in future years at whatever the new venue ends up being called, if it in fact keeps the Nissan Stadium rights, whatever. We don't got to get into stadium naming rights today. But I think that's the biggest contention is, will it diminish the atmosphere? Nissan Stadium is one of the fewer. It's getting smaller, the sample size, because all the new stadiums have, except for what Buffalo is building, which makes that an even dumber proposition. The idea that they're doing even more in public financing and not building a dome in damn Orchard Park, New York, where we're getting off easy traveling to Buffalo in week 2 because of how bad the weather will get there. And if you're building this thing without plans to host Super Bowls or provide a space for as many different events as humanly possible to make your money back on this godforsaken thing, then yeah, it's a blight upon the local economy. That's something that the state of Tennessee, fiscally conservative, is putting their money where their mouth is. They're saying, yeah, you can have $500 million in bonds, but put a roof on it. Make sure that we can use this thing year round. No hindrances by what Mother Nature may bring down on our heads, whether that's CMA Fest, WrestleMania, the Final Four, anything in between. And that's kind of the direction that people are taking. This is the point that I think a lot of people are trying to get across. And it makes the most sense for where we're already heading. It's an inevitability type of thing. Now, right, wrong, or indifferent, Okay. But that's something that, I mean, certainly the city of Nashville has been committed to, is ingratiating sports into the community of an already entertainment-driven city. Music city for a reason, right? Nothing is ever going to diminish that. But, like, think about the way that people still talk about Phil Bredesen for all the things that his administration, former mayor of Nashville, all the things that his administration was responsible for when they were bringing in the Titans and the Nashville Predators, and all these different things were coming to pass, and they at the forefront of professional sports in the state of Tennessee. Now, John Cooper, and really before that, Megan Barry, they have also shown a similar commitment to keeping that as a part of the fabric of who we are as a city, and in fact, trying to grow that and foster that growth organically. But it just comes down to, I mean, it literally comes down to brass tacks. 615-737-1045 is how you can react to any of this. And we'll keep you updated with the latest. I haven't seen much additionally from Nate Rao, which is who's kind of been the guiding light on this. Now, I haven't texted Nate or DM'd Nate in a while to kind of check in on what he's most curious about coming out of that Metro Sports Authority meeting. I probably should have done that before the show started today. But at this point, it's just kind of a day-by-day proposition, and it's making its way through all these different Metro Council meetings and state legislative processes before we actually get things that are concrete, or more appropriately, steel instead of concrete. Now, on the same token, I had myself had a similar stadium experience, or a stadium-related experience this weekend. About 30,000 people damn near did. I was so excited to go to Geodis Park on Saturday. I was excited to go out and tailgate. I was excited to go see the Nashville Soccer Club try and kick Atlanta United's ass. I did not see any of these things. Hell, I barely saw the tailgate. Now, that first part's on me. But there was a 3-hour rain delay. Damn near 3 hours. I had Titans Dolphins 2018 PTSD, the longest game in NFL history. I thought I was going to witness the longest game in MLS history if I tried to stick it out through that. Now, I didn't last. I made it about 35 minutes in the concourse, which now I have found my first complaint with Geodis Park outside of parking. I don't care about the parking stuff. Just take an Uber. The concourse isn't big enough for the rain delays. Like, I don't like being that jam-packed. Now, listen, I was at Garth Brooks when it got rained out. Nightmare. Concourse size didn't matter at Nissan Stadium in that moment. Let me tell you. But this unholy storm that brought itself down on our necks at Geodis Park on Saturday, I found an opportunity where the rain kind of let up for a little bit. Lightning was still going. We just ran to a bar at about like 8 o'clock. I guess 6:30 was supposed to be the kickoff. They made it. What is it called? Kickoff? Is that the appropriate term? Okay. Yes. I just gotta check with my soccer thesaurus back there. But I tried to wait it out. They were late to kick the match off. It didn't get started until like a little after 6:45. So about 15 minutes of soccer, then the lightning delay started. And so everybody's down to the concourse. Everybody's drinking $15 beer. Everybody's trying to get their hands on an empanada, which apparently sold out because so many drunk people who were already in the stands tailgating for an evening game at Geodis Park against what we hope will become a rival. A lot of people were going after the empanadas. That's my only complaint about Geodis Park. Concourse isn't big enough for a rain delay. So I got the hell out of there. Lucas stayed. Lucas stayed for the whole match, which I can't understand people like you. But there was it looked like a substantial amount of people. I mean, the upper deck was cleared out. But it looked like everybody who lasted made their way from the concourse into the lower bowl. And it ended up being a pretty exciting game, no?
Yeah, when it started back in the 19th minutes when play had to stop because of the weather delay, and they came back and picked up in the 19th minute, and it was really an electric finish to the first half. You had 3 goals, 2-1 lead for Nashville going into halftime. So the game was great. It's a shame that the sellout crowd wasn't able to see all of it because the crowd was awesome before the lightning came down.
Now, I had grand designs because I was very upset by the time that I got to the stadium. Now I got there late. I got held up. I underestimated both traffic getting from my house downtown to the liquor store, Frugal McDougal, up here No free shout-outs, but like in the Gulch, underestimated the amount of party tavern or pedal tavern and party barges that I was going to be stuck behind on a Saturday afternoon around 3:30. Underestimated how bad the lines would be at the liquor store on what had been, to that point, a beautiful day in Middle Tennessee. So I got there probably closer to 5 o'clock. Tailgate was fully underway. We never found the supporters section that was so gracious to invite us out to, because of course people aren't checking their phones because they've been drinking for 3 hours. So we're just sitting in some sad bleachers in the middle of the Expo Center at the fairgrounds. Just you, me, Ricky Young from the Wild Feathers, and a bunch of our buddies. Robert was there, just sitting, looking like fools. I could not. I mean, you probably got a little. I mean, you're used to dealing with me when I'm like that, but I was not happy when I got there because there was no plan. I was drinking warm tequila, sitting in the bleachers, waiting for a storm to come down on my neck. I had all kinds of big plans on Saturday that got ruined.
Good example for
Disaster.
Why the Titans want a retractable roof or a domed stadium.
But like that was the thing. Like just that simple canopy. Now I can't speak to the lower bowl or the lower concourse at Geodis, but I didn't get bothered by the rain. I mean, obviously they clear people out of the seats when the lightning starts, but I didn't get bothered by the rain at all. And that's just that canopy setup that they have at Geodis Park, because the players are getting rained on. You can physically see they get drenched.
Protects the fans from the rain, not the players.
No, players have no protection from the elements, which is fine. Like even something as simple as we talk about the Titan Stadium, even something as simple as a canopy. Now, I don't think with Nissan Stadium's current construction that would work, nor do I think that it would be worth the money. I mean, we're already talking about, they put in that whole LED light system that's going to be outdated because now they want a new spot. But I was that was the first time that I was paying attention to like the actual, I don't know, the elements of the stadium at Geodis Park and thinking, okay, this makes sense for what they did. Because I think a lot of people just look at it. It's a fairly simple structure, right? Outside of the fact that you can't walk all the way around the stadium because they've got the rich people section on the lower concourse. There's a club part of the main concourse, which is new to me. I don't understand why they can't just let people walk all the way around the stadium, but whatever. That's the thing that I think is people keep bringing up around the Titans and this roof, retractable or otherwise. Is that going to diminish the environment at Nissan Stadium? Because Titans games have been routinely affected by the elements, right? Whether it's the Eddie George, Steve McNair jersey retirement and Ring of Honor ceremony, where it's the hottest game on record at Nissan Stadium. And not only that, they botch the pyrotechnics and they set the field on fire for about 25 minutes, which remains one of the funniest moments that I've had at Nissan Stadium. Or whether, it's that it was in January, it was, I think, 2017, Jags-Titans, New Year's Eve weekend, freezing cold, and it clearly has an impact on the game because Derrick Henry is running through your face over and over and over again, and the Jags players, they don't want to do that because they're from, the Upper Peninsula of Florida. They don't want anything to do with the 250-pound running back, who, by the way, looks bigger, getting into them and making them feel every bit of that cold on a regular basis. This is something that's indicative of Kansas City and Green Bay, right? Those element games, it provides an additional thing that you can't account for. Makes it a lot of fun. But I think my understanding, and I don't think I'm the only person who's been told this at this point, but it's my understanding that a retractable roof is not something that they're interested in. That a roof in some form or fashion, whether it looks like SoFi, where it's translucent, it's technically open to the elements because of that little gap between the stadium structure itself and the roof.
So you can still have a weather delay.
Yeah, John Gruden famously against, the other thing that John Gruden is famous for in the last 6 months or whatever. John Gruden famously getting irate because there's a lightning delay at SoFi Stadium, even though there's a roof on this nearly $6 billion monstrosity. Whatever that looks like, retractable does not seem to be the option that they wish to explore. We'll see if that changes at all, but that seems to be where the budgetary analysis is heading. 615-737-1045. John is in Clarksville up next. Hello, John.
Hey, guys. The Titan Stadium, year in, year out, is always said to be the worst turf in the NFL.
The field itself?
The field itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's awful. And but if you go retractable, what type of service are they going to put down?
It's a good question, right? And these are all things that they have to account because they're just talking about the structure. They haven't even gotten to the field because that's the thing that that's the thing that Mike Vrabel wants to know the most about, and John Robinson wants to know the most about, probably.
What did Kevin Byard say when he was asked what's the number one thing you would want in a new Titan stadium?
Grass. Because you understand it as the players. It's a quantifiable difference in how often players are injured. Now, how they go about this is different. Is SoFi grass? I can't remember because, again, we weren't allowed on the field because of Los Angeles' COVID restrictions. I don't understand what keeping us in the stands versus putting us on the field in a socially distant setting was doing as far as the Los Angeles COVID restrictions. But
it's
whatever.
Artificial turf.
It's artificial turf?
Yeah, and I feel like it has to be.
Well, but now that's the thing that we're talking about, right? Arizona is the only one that has a dome but has grass because of the unique setup that they have to physically roll it in and out of the stadium to grow the grass so it can be serviceable for a football team to play on, or football teams when they have bowl games or things like that. How much more does that cost additionally? How much more does that become publicly financed? Is that part of the private financing that is being provided by the Adams family? Where are the percentages? We're still in the preliminary phases of this being disclosed publicly. I am certain that they have discussed it internally. Those are not things that have been brought to the forefront on these stadium discussions yet. But I think everybody understands what we're looking for. I think predominantly people would prefer to see the Titans play on a grass surface. There's less and less of that these days.
You're not hosting a World Cup game if it's not grass.
Yeah, but I think it feels like they kind of punted on the World Cup.
Yeah, if it happens, it happens. We'll find out in 3 weeks anyway.
June 16th.
June 16th, the host cities will be announced by FIFA.
I think we would have heard something, or there would have been rumblings around this from, Butch Spurrier and the visitors and what's the proper term for Butch Spurrier's department? Like visitors convention,
yeah.
Whatever it is, they host events. They're big on tourism, draft, stadium reveal, or jersey reveals, all these different things. So I feel like we would have heard some rumblings around this if Nashville was actually in it. But I think that everything has been muddled by the idea that the site that they would theoretically play at, Nissan Stadium, may be a giant construction zone when they host the World Cup in 2026. 615-737-1045. Your questions, comments, concerns are more than welcome. I saw an interesting article this weekend about a former Tennessee Vol and a situation that he is now facing in the NFL. I want to talk about which of the Vols players have landed in the best situation in the NFL. We'll do that coming up next. Okay. So we're going to get to this Vols in the NFL thing, or at least the latest Vols in the NFL thing here in just a second. But we've been talking about the Titans stadium plans, given Burke Nihill's comments on Friday and the experience that I had at Jodas Park this weekend. V-Love has tweeted us. By the way, shout out to V-Love, who still managed, despite being in the health and safety protocols, managed to orchestrate a successful F1 fellowship 8 a.m. Sunday morning at Nobles in East Nashville. We are grateful for the efforts that he puts forth, and we had a great time. There was homemade sliders this time. It's tremendous. Very much enjoyed those. I know. How many did you eat? Be honest with me.
Only 2.
That's not true. I said there was a full. It's simply not true. There was a full pan when I can't remember the woman's name who's there on a regular basis with us. She's a Mercedes fan. She's always decked out in her gear. But she brought over 2 trays full of homemade sliders. One was put in front of you, and then very soon there was only one that I saw. And it was just basically, it was like a stray sausage patty that had gotten caught in the fray as you mowed your way through.
I ate 2, maybe 3.
These homemade sliders. Yeah, now it's become maybe 3. We're starting to get a little closer to the truth. Anyway, so V-Love orchestrated that. But he tweets us regarding the stadium plans. I'm still waiting for somebody to address the future of the Music City Grand Prix when it comes to this new stadium build. Again, another factor that complicates this, because they have existing contracts that one would assume would conflict. Now, we asked Nate Rao at Axios about this, and I don't want to say that Nate kind of shrugged it off a little bit, but he made it seem like it was not going to impact the Music City Grand Prix substantially if they were to basically build, and we don't know specifically where they would build the new stadium, but the assumption right now is they would build it to the east, currently, of Nissan Stadium, allowing them to play games in Nissan until construction was finished. Now, the paddock and the track itself, or the course itself for the Grand Prix, that would directly conflict with the Music City Grand Prix. And that's a cool event that I thought was very well attended and well orchestrated this past summer in Nashville, that now has a 3-year total agreement to have the race, to have the Grand Prix, or the Grand Prix, if you want to be a snob about it, to have the Grand Prix in Nashville. Do they just reorchestrate the track? How does that conflict with IndyCar? Is IndyCar cool with that? I don't know, what's going to put them in violation of current contracts, if such things were to put them in violation with current contracts, which I have to assume this might. But again, the reporting on it, there's not been a ton of detail. It's just, okay, how much money is this going to cost, and where is the money coming from? That's really the phase that we're sticking in right now. But as we transition to look at the topic that Lucas had brought to my attention earlier, where the Tennessee Vols landed in this current draft class, I thought was pretty interesting to see. Now, you had Alante Taylor. Lucas, do you have the list in front of you? That's probably a cleaner way for you to list the players.
I have it in my brain, yes.
Which round, you know which round specifically they went in, each of them?
Ooh, not specifically all of them. I know Alante Taylor was a second-rounder to New Orleans.
Okay, so you've got Alante Taylor to the Saints. You've got Matthew Butler, who's going to play on the defensive line for the Raiders as a 5th-round pick. Theo Jackson here in Tennessee as a 6th-round pick. Velus Jones Jr., I believe, went in the 3rd or the 4th, Lucas?
3rd round.
3rd round, wide receiver for the Chicago Bears, who's starting offense. You look at their depth chart, and it kind of makes you cringe. Honestly, it makes you cringe for Justin Fields. No, respectfully to Velus Jones Jr., but woof. Tough scene there in Chicago this year. Around the 2nd-year quarterback. Who am I leaving off of that list?
Cade Mays, a 6th-rounder to the Carolina Panthers.
Okay, so those are the 5 players that got drafted out of Tennessee, which, great for the University of Tennessee. It's been a while since it feels like they've had that kind of volume go in an NFL draft, right?
I expected to have 4.
Right, and only 4 were invited to the Combine. Was Theo not invited to the Combine?
Theo was the surprise.
Okay, so as you sit here looking at those 5 players and the circumstances that they landed in, who do you think landed in the best spot? Velus Jones Jr., Cade Mays, Matthew Butler, Theo Jackson, or Alante Taylor in the 2nd round to the New Orleans Saints? Because I could make a good argument for Theo Jackson. Now, a second-round pick, Alontae Taylor, is going to see some substantial snaps, and they've had some attrition in the secondary in New Orleans. But an interesting article from Chicago, coming out of Chicago this weekend, about Velus Jones Jr. I mean, he's gonna get a role right out of the gate, like beyond returning abilities, which is kind of where most people thought that he was going to land, like outside the top 100. Was he a top 100 pick? I need to find the
71st overall.
Okay, so top 100 player, top 100 selection, not necessarily a top 100 talent in this year's draft. But you're talking about Velus Jones Jr. I would make the argument that he might be in the worst situation because I don't know. I mean, he's one of the oldest rookies in this draft class, given all the different things that came about during his college career, whether it's grad transfer, whether it's COVID eligibility, all these different things.
Just turned 25.
Yeah, he's old. He's old for a rookie. But he's really never played a high-profile role in the passing game during his first 5 college seasons. Comes to Tennessee, production's off the charts. Everybody's catching passes all over the place, deep balls. It's one of the most entertaining offenses in college football, and what I heard from from pro scouts is one of the ones that they enjoyed watching the most was Josh Heupel at Tennessee. Something to keep in mind. But Velus Jones Jr., 62 passes last year at UT. Bears feel that he can have a decent impact on their offense, but I'm looking at him as a third-round pick getting thrown into the fire right out the gate with, one, the protection that's in front of Justin Fields, a new head coach and a new coaching staff, which may end up being good, but you went from Matt Nagy, who, former NFL Coach of the Year, LOL, and well-regarded offensive mind coming out of a Kansas City Chiefs staff as their offensive coordinator there. Now, nothing about the Bears' offensive experience outside of the 2 times that their defense helped carry them to the playoffs and they got serviceable years, at least 2 serviceable years, out of Mitch Trubisky. There's not a lot about the Bears' offense that you would say, man, they've done a really, really good job with what they've had. Now you look at the protection in front of Justin Fields still, and you don't feel good about anybody who's going to be catching passes in that offense because you don't know if the quarterback's going to be running for his life or not. I think that it's probably between Alontae Taylor, just because we know the talent. We've seen the talent here watching him at Tennessee across his career, and the opportunity that he'll get right out of the gate. I think Cade Mays is probably harder to project as a 6th-round offensive lineman. And Matthew Butler, I think best case scenario, he ends up serving a depth role for the Raiders.
Every team could use a Matthew Butler.
I was advocating for the Titans to take a look at, I'm sure they did take a look at him, but advocating for the Titans to draft him to add to that additional interior defensive line depth around Jeff. But I think that you look at Theo Jackson and you say, yeah, feel pretty good about what was Tennessee. I mean, Alontae Taylor or Theo Jackson, who was Tennessee's best defensive player last year?
I would go with Theo Jackson. The way he played closer to the line of scrimmage.
Now wait.
Go ahead.
Are you doing best? Are you doing most productive? Because I think those are 2 different conversations. I easily make the case for Theo Jackson as the most productive.
Yes.
Because of how they changed his role.
Best pro prospect, as far as the tools that he displayed, Alontae Taylor. But most improved, most productive, unquestionably Theo Jackson.
Okay. So we will see what Theo Jackson's role ends up being here in Tennessee. But to look at, Noctropolis adds that the Titans added another UT player recently, which is the undrafted rookie free agent corner, Kenneth George.
Yeah.
But Theo Jackson, playing safety, likely at the pro level, going to see some special teams work. He's not Dane Cruikshank physically, but if he can find that role or a role within the Titans' multiple defensive back looks, whether it's nickel defense or dime defense, right? 5 defensive backs on the field or 6 defensive backs on the field. I would say that Theo Jackson, because of the depth here, because of who he's working under in his position group, and because of the pass rush that they have, Theo Jackson probably has the best opportunity of any of these 5 guys that got drafted this year. I think, is there a case for another one that I'm missing outside of Alontae Taylor just because of opportunity and talent?
I think Matthew Butler would have a case simply because, and I'm not terribly familiar with the defensive line depth in Las Vegas, but every team can use a Matthew Butler, a high motor interior defensive lineman, and especially if there is a lack of depth there, he's going to find a role on a 53-man roster in Las Vegas. But otherwise, I totally agree with you, because with the Velus Jones thing at surface level, it looks like he has the best opportunity. He's going to have the most opportunity as far as snaps, right? Just out of pure necessity.
Yeah.
But that works both ways. Everything we're talking about with Justin Fields, with no help protection-wise, a young, inexperienced wide receiver core, well, that can negatively impact those receivers as much as it can Justin Fields. And with the first-time play caller at the NFL level on top of that, and Luke Getsy.
I can't decide who I'm more worried about in year two, just as a general football fan, right? As somebody who wants to see young quarterbacks come into the NFL and succeed, even though they go to stinky teams.
But Lawrence or Fields?
Yeah, Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields. Like, I don't know who I'm more long-term concerned about. Because Chicago, man, I don't know what it is about the Bears. But they just, for the life of them, they cannot figure out. I mean, you saw how still miserable Corey Curtis, who's a forever Bears fan. He's been in Nashville for damn near 20 years, covering local sports for Channel 2. Just longtime miserable Bears fan, and the last good quarterback they've had, is Jim McMahon.
Well, for however much the Jags overpaid for Christian Kirk and Zay Jones and Brandon Scherf, they still did unquestionably more to help their second-year quarterback than the Bears did. You stack up those offensive depth charts next to each other, I mean, I think there's a pretty large gap.
Think about that. The Jags.
That's crazy, I know.
The Jags and the Bears. Woof. Anyway, it'll be curious to see how the how Tennessee's system, offensively and defensively, how much that benefits guys as pro prospects. Because I think we've seen both work to these five guys' advantage, certainly when it comes to the skill position player. 615-737-1045. Oh, okay. From Tennessee to one of Vols fans' most hated figures in the world of college football. Steve Spurrier wants some of the smoke that's going around in the SEC here lately. And we're going to tell you what the head ball coach had to say coming up next.
It is 11:03. Good morning. I'm Lucas Panzica. Justin Thomas won his second PGA championship of his career yesterday at Southern Hills Country Club in Tulsa. Was back 7 strokes from the top of the leaderboard at the start of the final round on Sunday. Stormed back, birdied 2 out of the 3 holes in a playoff with Will Zalatoris to win in Tulsa. Also his second major of his career. Golden State Warriors appear to be running away with the Western Conference Finals. Took a 3-0 lead in the series against Dallas on the road last night, 109-100. And the SEC baseball tournament field is set. The first round starts in Hoover on Tuesday. Vanderbilt, the 8th seed, after finishing out the regular season, losing a sweep to LSU at home, taking on 9th seed Ole Miss in a single elimination game Tuesday afternoon. Tennessee heads into the tournament as the 1 seed. The Vols await their opponent in the second round on Wednesday. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
All right, hour number 2 underway here on a Monday. Hope you guys are having a great day so far. Hope your week is off to a spectacular start. Hope we're helping you get just a little bit further through it throughout the course of the next 2 hours that we got left together. Lucas is making it happen. Chris Vannini of The Athletic going to join us in about 15 minutes from now to talk about the drama taking place in the SEC. We discussed it at great length last week, and frankly, why I think there's going to be a massive ripple effect in the world of college football coaching that I think we're already seeing the start of. In the meantime, you guys can jump in on the conversation, 615-737-1045 if you would like, especially if you have complaints. Lucas is dying to field your complaints. If you'd like to complain about us on the air, Lucas loves when you call in to the radio station just to tell him how bad we are. Have you gotten any of those recently?
Yeah, I think your foul mouth is rubbing people the wrong way this morning.
What did I say?
I don't know. You tell me.
Uh-oh.
Was FCC safe?
Yeah. I mean, we haven't done anything. We haven't done anything yet, I think, that would truly bother people. But sometimes I forget that it's like has summer vacation kind of started, so there's like people with kids in the car and stuff like that. Do you consider that we are a family friendly show? Is that how you would qualify us? I don't know, because I know that we probably should be, but I don't really give much consideration to that.
We're not family friendly.
It depends whose family you ask. Especially my grandmother. My grandmother gets on me about the same thing that you just got chewed out about, which is hilarious to me. But anyway, love you, Grandma. Speaking of grandparents, Vols fans, one of the most hated people in the history of the University of Tennessee is Steve Spurrier. Now, no matter how you feel about him, and certainly a younger generation of Vols fans probably remembers him more famously as the South Carolina coach than they do the Florida coach, which is crazy to think about. But we're starting to get there. He's been out the game for a hot second. Was he an AAF coach? Yes. For a minute? Is that the right league?
Yes, they were at the top of the league when the league collapsed. So I do believe he claims that AAF title.
Of course he does. Now, whatever you think of Spurrier, he's a great quote. Always a great quote. Especially when you've got drama like what's already happening in the SEC. So we know that Jimbo Fisher and Nick Saban kind of got into it secondhand with one another. Like there was never a direct altercation, but there was comments made by Saban. Jimbo responded about Texas A&M buying players when Alabama had not bought a single player, in the words of Nick Saban. Okay, Nick. And So this goes on. It spins out of control. There's hastily assembled news conferences. There's narcissism being thrown around. Jimbo Fisher keeps sarcastically referring to Nick Saban as God, and look how mighty this man is, and look at the way that he does his business when he's on video not that long ago, praising Nick Saban, waiting for quite a considerable amount of time outside the Alabama locker room after a national championship game to tell people just what a great guy his former boss Nick Saban is. Anyway, so anybody who is anybody in the world of college football is getting asked about this. And I'm reading this article from Football Scoop where Steve Spurrier is asked to weigh in on this. Now, it does not tell me where Spurrier was that somebody, I don't know if somebody just texted him for comment. I don't know if he's just actively seeking to get back in on the fight. I don't know if any journalist just calls Steve Spurrier and says, "Hey, Steve, this is happening. You want to say something about it?" And he just gives him the quote. I need a quote, Steve, something, anything, because it's going to be better than what he's going to get. He or she, whomever the journalist is going to get, in all likelihood, from any other source on this matter. Unless you're Lane Kiffin, who told, I think, was it Chris Lowe last week? It's the first time in Lane Kiffin's life he said he's speechless.
I thought it was Feldman.
Oh, that's right. Bruce Feldman, who will be on the radio show on Thursday, as a matter of fact. So here's Steve Spurrier. He's asked about this whole situation about Jimbo and Nick going back and forth. And here's Nick Saban quote, here's Jim. Damn it! Here's Steve Spurrier saying, "quote I don't think Saban told any lies there." Well, let's hear from Nick first, shall we? Let's hear from Nick Saban first. The initial comments that got everything stirred up, that caused great controversy in front of a group of Birmingham business leaders, where Nick Saban is low key, maybe not low key, maybe high key, trying to rally the troops and saying, "Yeah, we're not like Texas A&M, for example. We didn't buy a player. Texas A&M bought all of their players that made for this hugely successful 2023 class." So here's Nick with the comments that lit the fuse.
And you've read about them. You know who they are. I mean, we were second in recruiting last year. A&M was first. A&M bought every player on their team, made a deal for name, image, and likeness. All right, we didn't buy one player. All right, but I don't know if we're going to be able to sustain that in the future because more and more people are doing it.
So now Spurrier is asked for a quote. He says, "I don't think Saban told any lies in there." So I don't know what Jimbo was mad about. He just wants to get in on the mix. Now, what I think is questionable, I think the thing that is the most questionable is the idea that Nick Saban is being completely truthful there. Because if Nick is going to look at me dead in the face and say anything that Jimbo Fisher and Texas A&M did to put together one of the best classes in the history of that program, this is the 2023 class, one of the best classes in the history of that program, I don't think that Nick Saban would look you dead in the face in an honest moment and say, "Yeah, we didn't do anything that Texas A&M did to similarly recruit," even as we finished as the second best class in the 2023 recruiting cycle as opposed to the first, which is currently Texas A&M. I just think that Spurrier constantly inserting himself into this when he finishes with, "Since Jimbo beat him last year, I guess he can talk now." It just makes me think of my favorite Steve Spurrier quotes of all time, specifically any time that he took a run at UT, most famously the Citrus Bowl, which I think lives in infamy forever in the minds of Vols fans.
Can't spell citrus without UT.
Oh, I thought you had it.
Oh, no, I don't have it. I looked for it. I don't know if he said that in front of a microphone or if he said that to a reporter back then. That was in the 90s.
So before easy to find on YouTube is basically what we're coming up with there.
All right, he's had many good quips since then.
All right, good job out of you. Chris Vannini of The Athletic is going to join us next to talk about one of the biggest trends that just took place in college football. And, we'll talk about this SEC stuff as well. I'm Buck Reising. It's 104.5 The Zone.
The Buck Reising Show is powered by Spring Hill Heating and Cooling. Go to springhillac.com.
Welcome back. Very happy to have Chris Vannini of The Athletic join us now. It's been a busy week in college football, and that's just from a drama standpoint. There's a lot going on in the world of college football over the course of basically the last calendar year, and it's been really interesting to see the journalism that's coming about from it. Of course, you can check out everything that Chris writes and all of his colleagues doing great sports journalism work at theathletic.com. Chris, what's your last week been like? How much of this SEC sludge have you dipped your toes into?
Yeah, it's a mix of things. You know, we did like some audio stuff. The Athletic did a bunch of writing stuff. And on top of that, we're doing our kind of off-season big team previews every day. So it's May. It's supposed to be a downtime for college football, and yet we're seemingly as busy as ever.
It's as interested as I've been in college football in May, that's for certain. And it's just funny to see the way that things have come about. We're going to talk about this piece that Chris wrote last week about the lessons that the college football carousel have taught us this offseason. It's been pretty fascinating to watch all of that transpire. But what did you make, Chris, of Greg Sankey getting out there with a statement after Jimbo and Nick Saban had their little back and forth through the media on the idea that A&M's buying all of the players and Alabama would not ever deign to buy a player, in Nick Saban's own words, and Greg Sankey gets out there and kind of wraps him on the wrist with a yardstick?
Well, it made me think of back in 2009 when Lane Kiffin was at Tennessee and he was accusing Urban Meyer of committing NCAA violations and needling all sorts of coaches in that league, and Mike Slive had to come down and tell everybody to knock it off, and they did. So it honestly, I think, is a test of what kind of sway Sankey has with his coaches. Is he able to get them back in order and stop publicly sniping at each other? And that's what he attempted to do there with the public reprimand and some other things like that.
At Chris Vannini is where you can follow him on social media. So I was really enjoying a couple of things that I've seen on The Athletic in the last about a week or so, Chris, between the piece that you wrote on the coaching carousel and what it's taught us in the last couple of years, as a matter of fact, not just this offseason, and the piece that Andy Staples had worked on about just how seismic a shift we had seen and the ripple effects of all of the coaching changes, nearly 250 guys changing jobs across the landscape of this sport just this offseason alone. How did we get to this point where it would seem that there's not a job in college football that's too good to leave?
Yeah, well, that 250 number, the total number is actually a lot higher. It's just 250 people were impacted by USC firing Clay Helton and hiring Lincoln Riley. That whole trickle-down effect all the way into high school football, all because of that. And it was a good look at kind of how coaching changes impact everybody. But, yeah, one of the biggest lessons of this coaching carousel was that right there, Lincoln Riley, leaving Oklahoma for USC. You know, an Oklahoma coach had not left Oklahoma for another college job since 1947. Notre Dame hadn't had a coach leave for another college job since 1907. And yet both happened in the same year. We had LSU open. We had Florida open. It really just showed us that no job is too good to leave anymore, and that different coaches have different priorities, and suddenly places that aren't used to potentially losing a coach had to deal with that for the first time.
So with all the changes that have just taken, I mean, we're not even a year from when the NCAA was basically told how literally unconstitutional it was by the Supreme Court with name, image, and likeness legislation going into effect. How much more volatile has the changes, the seismic shift in college football from transfer portal to NIL had an impact on what we're seeing from the coaching hirings and firings right now?
Well, one quick thing there. The Supreme Court case was not about NIL. It was about how much money schools can give to players directly and some stuff like that. NIL was something they've wanted Congress to make a move on, and they haven't. So individual states went and did their own things, and that's kind of where we got to where we are now. And look, a lot of coaches are just frustrated with the nonstop madness that's going on. Honestly, I think the transfer portal change is almost a bigger deal than NIL, because now you've got coaches having to deal with losing players any day of the year and stuff like that. So, it's stuff like transfer windows, just kind of bringing some order to it, some regulation. It's a weird spot right now because college football is the most unregulated capitalism you can have right now, essentially. And I think the powers that be just kind of want to have a little bit of handle on where things are going.
Chris Vannini of The Athletic is our guest here on 104.5 The Zone. We're talking about the trends that we're seeing right now as it relates to college football coaches and how many of them are maneuvering throughout the course of the sport. I thought your note on 10-year contracts being the new norm was fairly interesting. Why does that seem to appeal to universities in the reporting that you did?
Well, I think it kind of goes along with what I just said about no job being too good to leave. Schools are scared of having to hire a new coach now. And so if they feel like they have somebody who is somewhat successful, they want to try to lock them down long term now. Mel Tucker got a 10-year deal, $95 million fully guaranteed. James Franklin's got a 10-year deal paying him $8.5 million. Brian Kelly got the same 10-year, $95 million deal. So it's the schools are desperate, and the schools historically always lose out in the negotiations with agents when it comes to those things. They get their lunch handed to them time and time again. And I think having 10-year contracts for coaches who, James Franklin has not done well the last 2 years. Mel Tucker had a really good year at Michigan State, but he's only had one good year there. So it's kind of stunned a lot of people at the number of at these lengths and guarantees of these contracts. But I think schools are terrified to lose somebody because now they know anybody can leave.
People have varying opinions on James Franklin here locally from his time at Vanderbilt and how he ended up leaving that program. A lot of people have a bad taste in their mouth about just the general James Franklin experience. What is it that Penn State sees in him that makes him such an asset? Because for the life of me, Chris, just as an outsider, I can't make it make sense.
I mean, look, he did win a Big Ten championship and got to a Rose Bowl. He's been competitive with Ohio State in most years. He's recruiting very well there. But the last 2 years have been rough. The COVID year, they started off, 0-5 or something like that. Last year, they go 7-6 despite having 8 players get drafted this year. So their fans are a bit frustrated. And honestly, that's what made the 10-year deal so surprising, is that I didn't think anybody involved in this wanted to be together for another 10 years. I don't know if James Franklin wanted to be there for 10 years. There was all the talk about him in USC, and his name comes up for other jobs all the time, and he's never going to talk about it. But it was pretty clear that he was interested in jobs elsewhere. So for everybody to just be like, nah, we're gonna commit to this thing really for the long term, maybe not 10 years, but several more years of this, frankly surprised me.
And you did well to lay out for people at theathletic.com is where you can read Chris's article and piece on the college football coaching carousel and what it's taught us this offseason. Of all the openings that you laid out for people to see just how many guys changed jobs this year, which is the most interesting to you to see how it kind of develops in this current college football environment?
What's most interesting to me is Lincoln Riley going to USC and Mario Cristobal going to Miami, not just because those coaches left, but because of the investment that both of those schools are putting into football now. And if USC and Miami are going to take football seriously and are going to pay to try to compete like one of the big boys, that has a chance to kind of change the landscape of college football a bit to get us away from the SEC overload of everything. I mean, the SEC has dominated college football for so long now. The sport needs a presence out west. It needs to have, you look at the Georgia roster, the Alabama roster, there's a ton of California kids on these teams. College football needs kids out west to stay out west. It needs to stay a national, fully launched sport, and in Lincoln Riley, you might be able to do that. Miami's got incredible brand cachet. It's Florida, it's South Florida. It's not technically the SEC. I think that could really change and perhaps pull us away a little bit from the SEC stranglehold on college football. if schools like that outside of the SEC can compete.
Why did it take USC and Miami so long to kind of realize, hey, if we want to be taken seriously again, that there needs to be legitimate financial investment? It would seem that Miami went for so long thinking that the school would make the coach and as a result the football team or things of that nature, that they just kind of got complacent. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, USC went through a lot of athletic directors and just kind of administrators who were all kind of part of the good old boy network, where, when Lynn Swann was the AD at USC and did nothing there, and I think he's the one who gave Clay Helton an extension that absolutely did not need to happen. So you've got now an AD there in Mike Bone, who knows how to run things, kind of the way they should be run, and not just because things are USC. And then Miami, that's a place that historically has not invested in football. Back in the 80s, the administration was pretty blatantly against the success of the football team and kind of what they represented and how they went about handling themselves. So for Miami to spend tens of millions of dollars essentially to buy out Mario Cristobal at Oregon, to hire him, to hire his staff, this big NIL program they've got going on, it's a level of investment that we'd never seen before, because now Miami boosters see an opening in this new world of college football where they can kind of have some control and make a difference.
At Chris Vannini is where you can follow him. Make sure that you're checking out all the great work that's being done on theathletic.com. Well worth your subscription for fantastic sports journalism. Chris, we appreciate you stopping by. Thank you for the insights and the analysis.
Yep, thanks for having me.
That's Chris Vannini with us on 104.5 The Zone. I'm glad he made the clarification about the Supreme Court situation not being directly tied. I think that's a mistake that I and a lot of people make, not being directly tied to name, image, and likeness, but the opportunity for athletes to capitalize on their name, image, and likeness, and by a result, name, image, and likeness legislation being worked through by the various states. Again, layers to this stuff. That's why we appreciate Chris and people like Chris who do good reporting on that, to kind of flesh out the details that do matter when it comes to how this stuff actually gets measured out. Given all the different movements, let's just keep it to the SEC for a second. We talked about Florida, the most consequential job, the job in the SEC that came open this year, and everything else that's swirling around it. Of all the different situations for SEC programs this year, which do you find the most interesting? 615-737-1045 is the number. 615-737-1045. Is there an SEC program? If you're a Tennessee fan, there's nothing wrong with saying Tennessee. There's probably the vast majority of you, I would imagine, are Vols fans, and you're looking to see how Josh Heupel can improve off that 7-6 record and what lies ahead in year two for he and his staff. I think there's a great many with LSU, as we talked about, or as Chris talked about, with Brian Kelly coming in and Ed Orgeron being a lame duck coach, just kind of hanging out, riding out the rest of the way. Kirby Smart finally getting the Georgia situation rectified by way of national championship, and how they continue to try and defend that against Alabama, who's coming for everybody's neck, as is always the case. I think of all of these, Lucas, do you have one? Because I think there's one on the board that many people are probably going to kick themselves for not nominating that I think is fascinating to me this year.
I will say, so far we put out a poll asking that question, and one of the options is Jimbo versus Saban. 80% of people are saying Jimbo versus Saban. It's still fresh.
Recency bias.
Right. That comes down to one game. An early season game.
October 8th.
Yeah, early October in Tuscaloosa. Alabama has a far better roster than A&M right now does. More experience. They have a quarterback. A&M does not know who their quarterback is. The best player in college football is on Alabama's roster, and that's not even the guy that won the Heisman last year. It's Will Anderson, the pass rusher. So I think that all comes down to one game, and then it's settled. It's done and dusted. If Alabama beats A&M by 3 touchdowns in Tuscaloosa, how much more do we care about Nick Saban versus Jimbo Fisher?
Yeah, Alabama's probably going to just run over them. Just beat the holy hell out of A&M. And we'll make it a big deal, and we'll make it about Jimbo and Saban, and we'll run back the comments. Everybody will, right? That's just how the news cycle works.
Yeah, so for me, it's more about how Georgia defends their title with Stetson Bennett as their starting quarterback and a bevy of weapons around him, particularly at the tight end position where Georgia is utterly stacked, they're going to be able to create tons of mismatches there. I'm fascinated to see how this season plays out without the constant, can Stetson Bennett do it conversation? Because we've seen now that he can. Can he do it, though, without being or having to lean on the defense as much as he did in 2021?
Did you feel compelled to pick a school other than Tennessee?
No, not necessarily. I mean, I do think the race for second in the SEC East is fascinating.
I think it's Kentucky. I have no idea what to make of Florida this year. None.
That's what you're most intrigued by.
No, that's not what I'm most intrigued by. I just think the SEC East in general, I think you almost have to pencil in Kentucky as number 2 until such time as we see Tennessee make a substantial jump and you feel that, okay, they're on solid ground. Not the way that Jeremy Pruitt finished the 2019 season with the bowl game and it all ends up being a house of cards, essentially, where everything falls apart and all these different issues end up being exposed, which happens when you lose to Georgia State and all these different things that he had to start out with that season with and then find ways to rebound. And, once the administration decided they wanted him out, you heard a lot more bad things about Jeremy Pruitt.
Yeah. Well, for obvious reasons. Kentucky's unquestionably on more solid footing just by nature of the culture that's been at that program for years.
Mark Stoops has done an exceptional job.
He's the longest tenured coach in the SEC East. People forget he got hired the same cycle Butch Jones got hired. So as far as the ceiling goes, I think you'd say Tennessee has a higher ceiling because of the program and its resources and what they have coming back. But no, I don't think it's tough to argue that Tennessee is on more solid footing right now going into year 2 of Josh Heupel than Kentucky is going into, year 10 of Mark Stoops?
Mine is not in the SEC East, though. Mine is in the SEC West. There's nothing to do with Alabama. Well, maybe it has something to do with Alabama, but not till the end of the regular season. Nothing to do with Texas A&M. Brian Harsin and Auburn. We've moved on. It feels like it's been an eternity since all that stuff around Brian Harsin was swirling. Like it seemed to be just a complete and total bleep storm that had landed up. He was on vacation in the middle of all of this, right? Where the message boards are going crazy and things about his relationships are speculation about his extramarital relationships is probably or relationship.
All unsubstantiated rumors.
Right. Speculation. I want to say that on the front end, even though the message boards clearly treated it as fact, and I'm sure there were some boosters fueling the fire in there. Auburn, I feel, is like a science experiment. Every year. They're so bizarre. Not just because they win games that they have no business winning and they lose to teams that they just, it is utterly unthinkable. The Auburn experience on a week-to-week basis as a team that has been, in its recent history, successful and has historical precedent of greatness as being one of the preeminent SEC programs. The way that they mangled this thing since the end of their season, with all the stuff around Brian Harsin, with the, substantial amount of attrition that they had on their roster in the transfer portal, citing Brian Harsin specifically as being the reason why it was an untenable work environment. And you have a contingent of players that came out in support of Brian Harsin and his staff. But to go 6-7 last year, his first year, all the speculation about Brian Harsin, was he equipped for an SEC job? He's not, wasn't it something like he's never been out of the state of Idaho or never coached outside of the state of Idaho or something ridiculous like that, as if that mattered in a meaningful way, the things that people were picking at Brian Harsin for. He has to improve. He has to have a winning record this year, one would think. But I think of all the weirdness that comes about of any SEC program, I think that you have to look at this. I think that you have to look at this and say, what happened to him and what Auburn, what the people who financially back Auburn football do to get their claws sunk in to the administration and impact the decision-making there, right, wrong, or indifferent. Auburn is among my favorite things to watch how their football season plays out, just because they seem to self-implode on a regular basis.
The pressure on Harsin is not going to necessarily be about in-game decisions and what Auburn is going to accomplish as far as that. It's going to be recruiting because we know Brian Harsin can coach. We know he can scheme up an offense. But can Brian Harsin recruit at a high enough level for Auburn to compete for the SEC West? Early returns say maybe not. Auburn had the 20th best recruiting class in 2022. Not positive what their status is for 2023. It's too early to tell. But that is the big question mark around Auburn. It was the big question mark around Heupel. Heupel's done a little bit more to answer that question at Tennessee than Brian Harsin has at Auburn. And maybe a lot of that's due to NIL and how far ahead of the game Tennessee is as far as the collective goes. But right now, that's the biggest thing hanging over Brian Harsin's head as far as the pressure he's under.
You can interact with the show on Facebook Live, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch if you would like. Jael in the YouTube comment says, my wife said it sounds like I'm listening to a male gossip show. LOL. Mind your business. And then he writes after this segment, my wife might be right. LOL. What else is the SEC if not drama? I mean, what else is sports talk radio but male, largely male gossip, although we do have many, many passionate female sports fans in the audience, many of whom call in and some of them cuss on the air. They have worse language than me for the very frustrated individual who was calling, screaming at Luke. I wish there was a way in real time to play those calls over the air. Like if you're calling into a radio station, like I almost think we ought to interrupt the commercial break to come in live time when you're getting screamed at. Just put that on air and see how it goes. So then they can get in trouble with the FCC.
No, we'd still be the ones getting in trouble.
That's right. 615-737-1045 if you want to jump in. Spring meetings are going to be a fascinating thing in college football. That will be next week, and we'll have more time to get into that there. But there was a question posed on social media this morning that I saw about the most hated building in Nashville. And I think that's interesting. So we're going to talk about that coming up next. This is a remix? What are you doing back there?
This is Wyclef Jean.
Okay.
We trying to stay alive.
What was that? Say that more Caucasian, please.
It's the name of the song.
Well, what's the Wyclef Jean Shakira song that haunts my grade school? Hot 96 or whatever the music station
Hips
was.
Don't Lie.
Is it Hips Don't Lie?
Yeah.
I think is Akon in that one too?
No, just Wyclef Jean, I think.
So good.
It's the Shakira song.
Long live Shakira. No, what's the World Cup song is the Shakira song.
Yeah, Waka Waka. Her catalog is chock full of bangers.
It's tremendous. I watched a 60-minute special on Shakira the other day. It was locked in. It's the most engaged I've been with anything on 60 Minutes. Not that there's not a million different things going on in the world that I need to be paying attention to, but they got me. They got me with the 60-minute Shakira special. Anyway, so there was a tweet that I saw this morning that I thought was hilarious because it directly applies to anybody in our listening audience who has lived in Nashville, Tennessee, who has driven through Nashville, who has moved away from Nashville out to, Williamson County or Rutherford County or wherever because of whatever your reasons are, right? There was it comes from East Nashville Urban Design on Twitter, at Urban East Nash. And it says, it's got two pictures side by side of the Nashville skyline if you're coming north on 65, right? From Williamson County, from Franklin and Brentwood, you're riding up 65. This is the view that you see. It's one of these new apartment buildings that sits right on the highway. Like the pool, they all have pools, which, you can up the rent just a little bit more if you have a pool for people to look out on their beautiful view of southern middle Tennessee and also 65 and 40 or 65 and 24 running right in front of them. It is called Haven at the Gulch, this apartment building. And they ask the question, is this Nashville's most despised building? I'm counting how many different colors and how ugly this thing is. It looks like one of those storage warehouses, right? When you're driving down the highway and you pass, like we have air conditioning storage units for you to store all your crap in. That's what it looks like they're doing, but with human beings. This apartment building. It is white, blue, gray, and some kind of nasty-looking burnt orange, just like in three spaces. You see the picture that I'm looking at, Lucas?
Yes.
And I think people will know the building that we're talking, because it's all new construction. It's right there by like Party Foul and in the Gulch, off 8th Avenue. If you know, like by the giant pixie sticks. Oh, you know what? They're similarly colored too. The pixie sticks. That's exactly what they look like. That horrendous roundabout in the middle of 8th Avenue, right by where Cannery Row, formerly Cannery Row, was going to be. This was the last weekend for that venue as one of Nashville's best and most fun music venues, local music venues to attend. That was a tough thing to see that close down. But now this monstrosity takes its place, basically. I can't think of a building that I dislike more in the we did a new Nashville thing a couple of weeks ago, probably about a month ago. Like this to me is emblematic of the new Nashville skyline that is hideous because it blocks the good Nashville skyline. Even with like the new Amazon Towers and the Grand Hyatt, you can still see the Batman building. But like depending on what angle you're looking at this thing, you would just see the ears of the Batman building. It's a blight. It's an eyesore. And I believe it to be Nashville's most despised building.
For me, any building where a colostomy bag has been flung around as a manner of assault would top the list.
That's
wherever that might be.
Like a weapon. Do you know I had no idea what a colostomy bag was until that happened?
Not me neither.
I did not like
learned something.
Is there a definition on Urban Dictionary that we can read of a colostomy bag? What, you don't want to give the place a free shout out with the colostomy bag? You don't want to do that?
I actually don't remember where it was.
Oh, I do.
Totally truthful.
I do. He just had a concert this weekend. But yeah, Lower Broadway is where you can find the colostomy bag slinging bars, or at least that one time where, I mean, I think that was still like middle of COVID where people were, still very. I think said establishment was still receiving pretty heavy fines about the fact that they were not respecting any of the capacity restrictions on Lower Broadway. And so the result is if you attended the jam-packed bar in the middle of the COVID restrictions, that a colostomy bag was slung in your face or used as a weapon by people trying to arrest said individual. I can't think of a building though that sticks out more. Like, it looks like construction. Now, I can say this because my family is from there, and I have been many times, and I know what impoverished countries around the world look like, because my family, my dad's side of the family, my entire dad's side of the family lives in Cairo, Egypt. Okay, and this looks like something that you would see like on the outskirts of the desert, like just cheap, affordable housing that they've just plopped down next to the Great Pyramids of Giza because, somebody got a good deal on the land there, on the part of the Sahara Desert that they had to build this misshapen, miscolored thing. Now, the people at the Haven at the Gulch, I'm sure we're going to get a strongly worded email or something like that, but I don't know. Like, when Deja Vu became a Whole Foods, that made me laugh. That was laugh out loud funny, because I'm pretty sure logistically that's right where one of those new office buildings / Whole Foods space / apartment buildings is, which was objectively hilarious. That I thought was an improvement on the skyline. This thing, I can't think. Do you get that? Like, do you look at the skyline often enough when you're driving around town? Because I know you're on the east side, so there's residential development, but there's not like the corporate commercial building development that there is downtown. Like, every day I pass it on my drive to work.
Yeah, east side is very residential, the development that's happening there. But yeah, I mean, I get a great view of the skyline on my drive in and out of work every day.
No, I'm saying, do you see a building that you're like thoroughly disgusted by anytime you look at the skyline, like a new building?
I mean, can the pixie sticks count?
I mean, you still get this kind of outraged about the pixie sticks?
I mean, I drive around that roundabout on the way to work every day. So I would like to see something.
Coming off Korean Vets?
Yeah. Something a little more Nashville there, other than just painted telephone poles.
I'm convinced they're telephone. I'm convinced they're spare telephone poles.
I think that's what they are.
Has somebody admitted to that? I want to know who designed that thing. I want to know who made a bunch of money off of repurposed telephone poles that they painted the same color as this godforsaken. Maybe that's why they thought it was okay to make this. It looks like what do you got? Rubik's Cube. It looks like a terrible, cheap knockoff Rubik's Cube with the color scheme that it has. I nominated as Nashville's most despised building. If you got a better one, 615-737-1045.
Lebowski puts a picture of that apartment complex we're talking about, the multicolored one. He said, Soviet-era apartments think these look like garbage.
It's crazy, man. Especially in my neighborhood, Buena Vista. Like, there are so many new builds that are straight up on 24. Like, on the highway. Their backyard is the highway. There's maybe a terrible chain link fence separating them from miles of traffic that's backed up, honking and breathing exhaust probably into your air filtration system if you're buying one of these new builds. And they crack me up. But yeah, I saw that tweet. It made me laugh. What is not going to make you laugh if you're a Titans fan is the free agent market, especially at one position that we need to talk about. Titans still have some needs. OTAs begin tomorrow. We'll tell you what's going on with this post-draft free agency market for Tennessee coming up next.
It is 12:02. Good afternoon. I'm Lucas Panzica. NFL Films and HBO have announced that the next edition of Hard Knocks in season will feature the Arizona Cardinals. This comes about an hour after Adam Schefter of ESPN reported Cardinals quarterback Kyler Murray will not be at OTAs this week. As expected, all does continue to remain quiet on his contract front for now, Schefter goes on to say. The SEC baseball tournament field is set. The first round starts in Hoover tomorrow. Vanderbilt, the 8th seed, after finishing out the regular season, losing a sweep to LSU at home, they'll take on 9 seed Ole Miss in a single elimination game Tuesday afternoon. As for Tennessee, the Vols head into the tournament as the number 1 seed and await their opponent in the second round on Wednesday. Tonight, the Eastern Conference Finals continue on as the Miami Heat lead the Boston Celtics 2-1. Tip-off from TD Garden in Boston is at 7:30. Miami star Tyler Hero not expected to play tonight. And the Atlanta Braves face another divisional opponent this week after taking a weekend series against the Marlins to get to 19-22, taking on the Phillies tonight at home. First pitch at 6:20. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once in your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Made it to the final hour of today's show. Welcome in. If you've been hanging out here with us, welcome back. We're happy to have you. 615-737-1045. You can jump in on the conversation if you like. You call that number. Lucas Panzica will pick up the phone. You can yell at him if I've said something that's pissed you off, or you can talk very nicely to him and perhaps he'll put you on hold and you can speak to the rest of us like grown adults. 615-737-1045. So, you heard in Lucas's update, I've just gotten the press release from the NFL about Hard Knocks. Arizona Cardinals on HBO and NFL Films joining forces for Hard Knocks in season. Oh, I thought this was the training camp. Who's the training camp Hard Knocks?
I'm not sure. No, this is for their second installment of the in-season Hard Knocks.
Oh. Did you ever watch the Colts one?
I didn't watch a minute of it. Oh, that's not true. I watched the videos that came out of the locker room post-Jacksonville loss.
That's the only time
It was priceless.
I never went to the actual HBO to watch that final episode.
Me neither.
I just waited for the highlights.
But what's the last one you watched in general? Hard Knocks.
Hard Knocks?
For me, it's the Raiders' Antonio Brown one.
Oh, mine goes way back beyond that. I think it was Baker Mayfield's rookie year. So
that was the year before, I think.
4 years ago. I think that's right. Yeah, the Cleveland Browns and who was it? Todd Haley and everybody's favorite Titans defensive coordinator, former Titans defensive coordinator, Bountygate extraordinaire Greg Williams, trying to publicly undermine Hugh Jackson in one of the most dysfunctional NFL coaching staffs that was put together. That was the last time I watched Hard Knocks. I have zero interest. None whatsoever in Hard Knocks. Jack Shepard on YouTube writes, it's the Lions this year for training camp. Oh, good.
That's right.
There will be one good Dan Campbell quote that goes viral out of that, and the rest of it will be slop. I don't know. Maybe this is still something that appeals to people, and I understand that I come at this from a different perspective, right? Like I'm at practice every day, so like maybe I don't see the meeting rooms or when they cut the guys in person, but like I get it. You know, I get what a football practice looks like. I see NFL players on a regular basis, and I understand that that is not everybody's experience. And then if you're a fan of the Detroit Lions or a fan of the Arizona Cardinals, that you want to consume as much of your team's stuff probably as humanly possible. Titans have never had Hard Knocks, as far as I can remember. I think that is so, because that would have been in the Titans era since they've been doing Hard Knocks. And, you know, it's not like Mike Vrabel didn't want anything to do with that.
But what's interesting to the neutral fan about Detroit Lions training camp?
Oh, well, I think it has less to do about what's interesting to the fan, to the general fan on the Detroit Lions as it is, okay, who said yes? Or like who doesn't have a choice? They have to say yes to Hard Knocks. Because at this point, I mean, nobody wants anything to do with this stuff. Even though it's basically a team sanctioned product. You're not seeing like the reason why I was checked out by the time the Antonio Brown Raiders season came along is because they didn't show anything. They didn't show any of the stuff that was being reported. There was nothing on Antonio Brown freezing the bottoms of his feet off in a French cryotherapy chamber. None of that. There was none of him mother bleeping Mike Mayock on a practice field. None of that. Like all of the real stuff that happens, especially when you've got a character who you're trying to prop up, like Antonio Brown. They don't show you the real stuff. What they show you is J.J. Watt at 5:30 in the morning flipping a tire while the sprinklers are going off. That's what they show you.
They covered the frozen foot thing pretty heavily, from what I remember.
Not the way that it should have been covered, right? Like there was obviously.
Well, you just wanted to see his mangled feet the whole time? Is that how you wanted to see it covered?
Yes. Don't you? I want the real stuff. I don't. This is my whole thing with like The Last Dance, right? People are still yelling at me about how I slandered the 6-part Michael Jordan Last Dance commercial that he basically fed us all in a time when we were desperately craving sports because no sports were taking place. So ESPN made the correct business decision, pushed that thing through production and got it to us in the middle of COVID when the NBA Finals should have been taking place. But yeah, I got no interest in Hard Knocks. What I do have interest in is, speaking of the Browns, is a former Titan agreeing to a deal with Jadeveon Clowney. Former Titan Jadeveon Clowney agreeing to re-sign with the Cleveland Browns yesterday. 1-year contract worth a maximum of $11 million. Now, the reporting on this was that there were multiple teams interested in offering Jadeveon Clowney $14 million or $15 million a year on a multi-year deal. I'm looking around at the NFL and saying, which one of you fools? Which one of you? He was productive. He was fine last year. He had 9 sacks. He had 2 forced fumbles. Played across from Myles Garrett. Made him hugely effective. Kind of thing that you were wanting and that you did see a little bit of early on in the 2020 season with Jeff Simmons. But when Clowney got hurt, that very much faded away, and then you had one of the league's historically worst pass rushes all of a sudden because you were so paper thin at that spot. He's only 29 years old. It's crazy to me. It's crazy. Jadeveon Clowney feels like he's been in the league for at least a decade. And now he had a 1-year deal with the Browns, up to $10 million. But the funny part about all of this was he put on his Instagram page. The NFL announced that he's re-signing with the Browns, so he took the post, he reposted it on his story, and all it said in the caption was, "Run it back." And, I mean, how can you not laugh openly at that? How can you be so lacking in self-awareness if you're Jadeveon Clowney to say, hey, let's run this back, guys? Has he forgotten already what the hell happened to the Browns last year? The fact that they finished 3rd place in the division, only above Tyler Huntley, quarterbacking the Baltimore Ravens by that point in the season, that they finished under 500, 8-9. And yeah, you've got 2 of the most dominant pass rushers in the sport between Clowney and Garrett, but also for what? You didn't win anything. Run it back. I wish that I would have gotten to know him better. He was only here for a year, and obviously it was all on Zoom. It was in the middle of COVID season, so we had zero interaction, zero get to know you with Jadeveon Clowney during his brief stint as a Tennessee Titan. But he seems like a good quote. He seems to be comfortable just saying things, which would have been swell for people like me. But the idea that his big statement on social media was run it back, 3rd place in the division, 8-9 record, and a quarterback whose shoulder was falling off. Now you got the upgrade, right? Except he's Deshaun Watson, and based on what's happening in the NFL's legislative process, outside of the current legislative process, the actual United States legislative process that Deshaun Watson is embroiled in the middle of, Jadeveon Clowney thinks they're running what back? It's laughable to me.
Didn't he take a shot at the Titans on the way out when he signed with Cleveland, saying he's going to a team with a better record?
He said it was something, and I don't want to misquote him. I don't want to be unfair. But it was something to the effect of, yeah, how many games did Cleveland win this year? Oh, that was more games than the team I was on last year won. Like, he didn't mention them by name or whatever.
That is what he said. He said, you guys won 12 games last year, right? More than the team I played on.
Yeah, which was more games by one, right? The Titans had 11 wins that year.
Correct.
Excellent. He seems completely lacking in self-awareness. And also, I just love the idea that the Browns are running something back. They have done no winning of consequence. I mean, that's not true. Let me be fair. They made it to the playoffs. They did make it to the playoffs 2 years ago. So I would like to be fair in my criticism. But the Browns have done nothing that matters in a way that all of us felt like they were supposed to do something that mattered, with Baker and Odell and Jarvis and Myles Garrett and all these different players that the Browns added, and that all, for what? For what? 8-9 last year. And now Baker Mayfield sitting on your salary cap for potentially $19 million a year, and you can't get anybody to take that guy. Now, relating to the Titans, because you're starting to see post-draft free agency signings. Have you seen a couple come across, Jadeveon Clowney being one of the bigger ones? But the Titans still have needs that they have not yet addressed. And the biggest position that I think they need to address still, the options are getting pretty lacking pretty quickly. I'll tell you what that is coming up next.
The Buck Reising Show is powered by Spring Hill Heating and Cooling. Visit springhillac.com.
I'm telling you, man, I could not be happier with the work that I got done by Spring Hill Heating and Cooling. I signed up for their Comfort Club, by the way. You can do that too. It's like $189 a year. They'll come change your filters. They'll do regular maintenance on your HVAC units. Excellent work at Spring Hill Heating and Cooling. Okay, so free agent stuff starting to pick back up again. We're into OTAs. By the way, rookie tackle Nicholas Petit-Frere, the Ohio State tackle who was a third-round selection before they picked Malik Willis. On day 2, they picked up NPF. He's going to be on the show tomorrow at 11:30. He's like, I know offensive linemen initially don't hit people as, oh, wow, I got to hear this dude. You got to hear this dude. This man, he is one of the most engaging individuals I've ever talked to in now 7 years of covering professional sports. He's a card. So 11:30 tomorrow, coming off the practice field at OTAs, their first OTA, the Titans, taking place tomorrow, and we'll hear from Mike Vrabel at the podium as well. So that'll be a good time. But now that we're starting to cycle through this and get closer to, okay, needing depth, September, not right around the corner, but we're getting closer each and every day, minute by minute, hour by hour, and still clear and obvious needs for a team like the Tennessee Titans and positions that you can still do a little bit of work on in the post-draft free agency market. So Clowney, a deal like what he got, 1 year, $11 million, still hunting down, trying to figure out who the hell offered or was willing to sign Jadeveon Clowney for $15 or $14 million, the way that Ian Rappaport had it reported yesterday. But now that we are getting into this for the Titans, I still think that there is a need for a contributing, doesn't need to be a starting player, but a contributing player at the wide receiver spot. And let me tell you, we're running out of those good options really, really quick. Now, SpotTrack.com has the list of available wide receiver free agents that have not yet been signed. Now, I must say on the front end that there has been an occasion where one of these guys on this list will have been signed and they haven't updated it right away, but just kind of cross-checking this list with the list of names that I had written down, it seems to be as accurate as anything out there. So, Julio Jones, the name at the top of the list, you just lived with that and did not like the experience. He's out on the street. T.Y. Hilton, Cole Beasley, Emmanuel Sanders, who is 110 years old. He's actually 35. And had a decent season in Buffalo, has had a decent couple of seasons in Buffalo. Deshaun Jackson, Danny Amendola, who absolutely roasted Elijah Molden in Week 18 last year, but over a substantial sample size. No thank you. OBJ, still sitting out there on the open market. We haven't heard much at all about Odell Beckham Jr., and I don't know how much of that is directly related to his ACL recovery. I imagine a substantial amount. Now, I would say to you that you saw what the Robert Woods, with a combination of Robert Woods and Odell Beckham Jr. and Cooper Kupp, cannot be left out. You saw what that looked like with the Rams last year, but that you would have potentially two guys recovering from torn ACLs on the same roster at the same position, less than ideal. You need somebody who's going to contribute or at least can fill in if Robert Woods isn't ready to go right out the gate, or if Treylon Burks, God forbid, suffers some kind of a setback, or if Kyle Phillips is, looks promising and can probably play for you in the slot right out the gate, but there are so many different factors in the NFL that you cannot foresee. Offensive line depth and wide receiver depth are the two things that we've hammered into your skulls since the pre-draft process began. And still, it remains a situation where you would like to be on a little more solid ground. I'll be honest with you. Just as I look through this list, I don't see anybody that appeals to me outright. Now, you have some familiarity in Chester Rogers, who at 28 years old did give you some substantial snaps. You could bring Chester back in theory, and you could run that back to a degree. Chester, I thought, was he up and down. Was one of the guys who we talked about. He and Marcus Johnson both at that position talked about them glowingly coming out of training camp. I think Chester largely lived up to the expectation. I mean, he's a one-year deal player, and he's been in a couple of different spots. So you like one, that he knows your system, and two, that he is still at an age where he would be considered pretty good value based on what is out there and available. Other than that, like, I'm good on Mohamed Sanu. I don't need Adam Humphries at the same age, who has already experienced the Tennessee Titans and did not come out the better for it with all the concussion issues that he suffered. There's names like Chris Moore, who you've heard with the Baltimore Ravens and the Houston Texans, Tavon Austin out there most recently, a Jacksonville Jaguar. Like, none of it sounds good, right? But as I look at what's available, I'm not saying that they're outright not going to sign any free agents at the wide receiver spot before training camp, but I would be kind of hesitant if this was what I was looking at, if I was John Robinson and his staff, and saying, yeah, I think that gives us at least competent depth. Outside of Chester, I'm good. And I don't know what Chester Rogers may have wanted on another deal with the Titans. I don't know what those, if there was any interest in bringing him back initially, if they were just content to let him walk and see how the market played out, and maybe you get him back in a similar situation where it's another one-year deal. Maybe Chester Rogers doesn't want that. Maybe he's looking for a little more job security. There's a million different factors that can come into play here. But none of them look to be appealing at this point. When guys like Tajay Sharp and who was my guy? The guy whose name I couldn't remember earlier, Lucas. Keelan Cole. When Tajay Sharp and Keelan Cole are coming off the open market earlier than the rest of these dudes, you're just kind of looking around like, I don't know. I'm pretty good at the wide receiver spot.
Should we put it to a poll? Who finds a landing spot first, Julio Jones or Odell Beckham?
I bet it's Julio, honestly. I mean, Julio, it's not that Julio looked the best most recently, but I mean, I came away from the Houston Texans game in Week 18, one, being shocked that 36-year-old Danny Amendola was doing that to, rookie corner Elijah Molden over and over again in the third quarter. Was shocked by that. But I also came away with thinking, man, Julio looks pretty good. Pretty. Do we have Larry David? The pretty good?
We do not have that. We should. That's a good drop.
Okay.
But you're talking about the regular season finale.
Put it in the suggestion box. Yeah, regular season finale. Julio was good. Like, they needed Julio to play as well as he did. And Julio, health-wise, was as good as he was going to look coming into the playoff game, right? That was the whole thing I talked about on primetime last night. Like, that's why Titans fans are still so butthurt about all of the rightfully so. Like, still the way that it came crashing down is because you felt like everything was cosmically aligned in your favor. Julio's hamstrings, Derek's foot.
We use it when we can.
Was that worth trampling me? Thank you for your silent laughter off the mic. That does not help anything. I need Robert's distant laugh echoing in the background anytime we do something at my expense. Terrible. How am I supposed to bounce back after that? You threw me off with the Julio. You can't use it. Neither of them are here anymore. It's relevant. It's irrelevant on both sides when you use that sound anymore.
Yeah, we use it sparingly.
And yet it still comes up. So of all these different things, like, I don't know, man. Because Julio's thing is, I mean, it's clearly eroding around him, his hamstrings, because he can still physically do the things, like, he still does the things physically the way that he did them when he was 27. It's just his body can't handle that anymore. Like, that kind of explosive athleticism, it fades. It wears on your body. Julio Jones is as good a case study for that as anybody. Odell Beckham, because this is the second ACL tear. Is it the same knee? That'd be my first question. Because Andrew says on YouTube, I'm just saying, OBJ is a J-Rob special off that ACL. Yeah, I mean, maybe, but like that just happened in the Super Bowl. That was Robert Woods. Robert Woods was after the Sunday Night Football game because he had a big game against the Titans sometime in December at a practice, if I recall correctly. And by the way, Robert Woods, who spoke at the Titans Foundation dinner, he's one of the several people that was in attendance last Wednesday. He was talking with Mike Keith pretty extensively about his recovery process and seems to be in a pretty good spot. It was the first commentary that we'd heard from Robert Woods since he was introduced as a Tennessee Titan right after the trade occurred. And he did seem to be, or at least he was leading on, that he was in a good place recovery-wise. Looking at this, like, I don't know what week, for example, I was paying attention to what Austin Stanley and Zach Bingham were doing this morning on A to Z Sports. And I saw them pose the question, what week of the season will Robert Woods make a major impact on the Titans offense? Like, how long or how deep into the season is it reasonable to say, okay, this guy is now wide receiver 1, question mark? Because I still think he would be. I don't think that's fair to put all of that burden on Treylon Burks right out of the gate. Now, whether they have to do it out of necessity, I think is a completely different question. But of all the things that are out there, man, I'm good on all of it, basically.
On Odell Beckham, it was the same knee that he tore the ACL in 2020, but Ian Rappaport actually reported on the Pat McAfee show in April that the surgery he had to repair the latest torn ACL corrected a bad surgery he had on the same knee a couple of years ago. So Rappaport said, in a weird way, there's a little bit of relief from everyone because now it can get fixed right.
Wow. Does Odell Beckham have, like, legal recourse? I mean, I guess that's kind of a risk. I'm sure they make you sign. Have you ever had surgery on anything?
Never.
I've never had surgery either, other than I had wisdom tooth surgery. That was about the extent of it. I can't remember if they made me sign waivers or not. But, like, I assume you have to sign, like, some kind of paperwork saying, yeah, if something goes poorly in the middle of this, the hospital isn't liable. Anyway. So, looking at the market for the wide receivers, I'm kind of sitting there thinking, okay, like, of all the different places that you could go, I'm probably good. I don't feel on the same note, depending on where Eric Fisher is, because Eric Fisher had a different injury when he came back from injury with the Indianapolis Colts last year to play left tackle for them. He was dealing with a popped Achilles. Now, that's a different kind of athleticism and a different kind of rehabilitation process that I think you saw him clearly worse off as a player, even though he's only 31 years old. He's right around the same age as Taylor Lewan, for example. And as you look at, for example, Eric Flowers, I think at the guard spot, Matt Paradis, similar age, or 32 years old. It's not like a market upgrade or a good depth spot behind Ben Jones, but still on the offensive line side of things, there's not a ton of great options out there either, but you still feel better about what they could add to bolster their depth at the position group. That kind of stands out to me. Now, as they get ready to take the field tomorrow for OTAs, the Titans, there's a lot of stuff that I think is going to be interesting to see how it plays out. And this is something that I'm writing later this afternoon for A to Z Sports that I started working on this morning. Just kind of paying attention to a couple of different things that are going to take place. Because it's the first opportunity for the Titans rookies to kind of have, it's not a full go practice, but you're getting as much thrown into the fire as they will have been to this point. They're mixing in with the veterans. There will be additional work. We talked to Coach Mack about this on Friday, if you recall. There will be additional work that these guys get with the coaching staff independently of the veterans, but now they'll be thrown into the mix. Now, how Ryan Tannehill, the connection with Ryan Tannehill, the wide receivers, the new tight ends, all over the place, this is going to be the thing that's the talk of OTAs this weekend. He is going to be heavily, heavily scrutinized. He is going to be, you are going to see all manner of annoying tweets that most people are going to think are stupid, and yet a lot of people will still gravitate towards them. How many incompletions did Ryan Tannehill throw on any particular day? How many interceptions did Ryan Tannehill throw at any particular OTA. He is going to be hyper-analyzed. And also, in the same token, Malik Willis and how that looks next to the veteran quarterback, even as we understand it's still very base-level stuff. Now, between that and how Burks and Phillips respond to the situation, I think is going to be pretty critical to this whole process. Because the sooner that Tannehill can get on the same page with those two guys, with Austin Hooper and with Chigakonkwo, you're going to feel a lot better heading into whether it's week 1 at home against New York or week 2 on the road, Monday Night Football against the Buffalo Bills. You're looking for growing pains in this offense to be ironed out as soon as humanly possible, and that will start this weekend. But outside of that, I think that what would you say, Lucas, if I posed you the question? I'd be happy to hear from the audience on this as well. 615-737-1045. What is the most under-discussed storyline of the Titans heading into this portion of the offseason? Because I think I've got a pretty good one that most people have counted out. Is there one for you that jumps out? Or if you guys want to call in on this, we'd be happy to take your calls on this too.
I'd have to think about it. I mean, I feel like we've looked into every angle that we could possibly look at as we wait for someone to hit the field for OTA. So maybe that's a bad question for us and a better question for the audience.
I'll give you a hint because it plays into the conversation that we're having right now about the wide receiver market. Give you a massive hint. It's about as big. And if you say Mason Kinsey, I swear I'm gonna fly through that 3 foot of glass that separates you and I. I'm gonna hit you in the head. Don't tell HR.
You do not have the upper body nor the core strength to do that.
If you say Mason Kinsey, that may give me Incredible Hulk strength. Like you may see me Hulk out in the studio. I'm asking you the question. You're looking at me
about
with it.
Under discussed storyline.
It's Des Fitzpatrick. We're not gonna play this game anymore. Des Fitzpatrick. We're not talking at all about a 4th round wide receiver from last year. At all. How he. If there is any hope for this guy to contribute as a wild card with 0 expectations, and I mean 0 expectations, I mean publicly. The coaching staff obviously has expectations for him. John Robinson, when he was on the radio show, I can't remember if it was, the last time we had John on was probably Combine.
Yep.
I think it was around the Senior Bowl that we had John on the radio show. And we were talking about Dez, and he felt that Dez had done things at that point to make significant strides towards the end of the year that made them feel more confident about Dez Fitzpatrick. Now, I don't know if that's just something that you say because something needs to be said about the fact that they traded up for this guy, and he had a negligible impact last year. Forced into action in a couple of games because of all the injuries, but where this person carves out a role for himself, special teams, wide receiver depth or otherwise, I think he is in as good a spot as humanly possible because I expect 0 out of him. I don't think fans even consider him when they're talking about the wide receiver group that the Tennessee Titans are rolling into 2022 with. I think that creates an opportunity for him to exceed just non-existent expectations and to prove to not just us, but himself that he is capable of playing at the NFL level. And if not, it just goes down as another miss by John Robinson in the same light as, for example, a little different than Darrington Evans because I think his body betrayed him as much as anything. But they moved on from that fast, quick, and in a hurry as a 3rd-round pick. If that happens with a 4th-round pick at wide receiver, a position that you critically need this year, that would be a tough scene. Last call for phone calls. We'll do some polls coming up next as well and wrap up the show. I'm Buck Reising. It's 104.5 The Zone. All right. Put a bow on this Monday, shall we? Fun show today. If you missed anything, Chris Vannini of The Athletic talking about the changing landscape in college football, or the stadium discussion we got into to start the show, or even if you're just now jumping in your car and you didn't catch the free agency portion of our talk today. Buck Reising Show in your favorite podcast app. Throw us a rating and a review if you would be so kind, and we would greatly appreciate you for that. Tomorrow, Nicholas Petit-Frere going to be on at 11:30. That'll be a good time. The Titans rookie offensive tackle will have a lot of coverage from Titans OTAs. I'm going to be out there. It's happening literally right in the middle of the show. Like, it's going to start at about 9, and then I'm going to go to the practice facility. I'll come straight to the radio show afterwards. I'm not going to be able to talk, though, Lucas, about what I saw until like 11 o'clock because I can't say anything until practice is over. So I'm going to be sworn to an oath of secrecy until like the buzzer goes off at 11:30 on the practice field, and then I can tell people what I saw at 9 a.m.
We'll just talk about what we had for breakfast until then.
It's a stupid thing, but I get it. I mean, whatever. You got to protect competitive advantage that's taking place in OTAs, I guess. I'm just happy to be able to go. And like I said, the Tannehill stuff is going to start in full throat tomorrow, given that he and Malik Willis will be on the practice field together at the same time. I want to know if Derrick Henry's going to be there. I don't think that's the case, but that is something that I am curious about.
He was not last year, right? He was doing his own workouts in Dallas.
Typically, he is not there. Now, it's not a concern, but with these, the report from Fowler last week, Jeremy Fowler, about that the Titans were at least open to the possibility of extending Derrick Henry with 2 years left on his deal. I'm not saying, hey, sound the alarm if Derrick Henry's not at OTAs tomorrow. I'm just saying it's an interesting development if he's not, and it'll continue to be something that's tracked because Derrick is going to be one of the biggest stories of the year with how he responds. But anyway, that will be a good time. Derek R. says, what'd you have for breakfast today, Lucas? And then somebody immediately responds in the chat, whatever J. Martin Ramon left behind.
Nothing today.
Garbage disposal.
They did not leave anything behind today.
All right, let's do some polls.
Oh, Nelly, this is Keith Jackson talking about college football. It's time to stop the count. The polls have closed, and the granddaddy of them all has been tallied with your poll update. Oh, Nelly, talking about Buck Reising Show producer and daily correspondent, Lucas Panzica.
Presented by Two Rivers Ford. Custom order any new Ford from Two Rivers. They will deliver it to you when it gets manufactured. Would you wait out a 3-hour rain delay to finish watching a sporting event? 65% say no.
No, hell no. No and hell no is the answer. But I heard you had a great time at Geodis Park up until like midnight is when you left the stadium, yeah?
Yes. Jose also says, if you didn't, you missed this with a video of the pitch invader that got tackled by a security guard, and I did get to see that live and in person, which was awesome.
I think it played just as well on social media as it would have in person, but to see it in person would have been hilarious. Not worth waiting 3 hours. I'm sure it was funny. Not worth waiting 3 hours when I can get it literally instantaneously on the internet after the fact.
What is Nashville's most despised building? John says New Nashville has put up some horrible structures, but I still think the gold block trash is still one of the ugliest buildings I've ever seen. I don't know if this is still up. Do you know what I'm talking about here?
I saw the picture that he tweeted us. I've never seen that building
Never seen
before.
that. Literally just a big gold cube.
Yeah, it's hideous. Now, if such a building was to exist, I bet it was like out by the Titans practice facility in Metro Center, because there's a lot of buildings that look kind of like that, except, not just like a giant gold Rubik's Cube. But no, I maintain that the apartment buildings being built off of 65 South as you're coming north into Nashville from Williamson County, I maintain that is the ugliest building in the city of Nashville. Full stop.
John posts a picture of you standing on the front porch of your home. I don't know how he got a hold of it.
I don't either.
But that is his submission.
It's deeply concerning, the fact that people on the internet have pictures of me at my house. Now, this was 3 years ago when I bought the house, and thankfully it looks a lot better. Had some landscaping done since then, but still.
A lot of people said Opry Mills, too.
Well, I think that's because they harbor resentment for the former theme park that used to occupy that space, because now you have a giant strip mall outlet mall, where people gravitate, and it just kind of, all the bad things about malls. Opry Mills has a lot of bad things about malls about it.
Which former Vol is in the best situation as an NFL rookie this year? 43% go with Theo Jackson. 34% say it's Velus Jones. 18% Alontae Taylor in New Orleans. Only 5% give it to Matthew Butler in Vegas.
It's probably, I think it's probably Theo, just because he's not going to have to play right away, and they'll have time to figure out how to use him properly, which he's clearly shown he's capable of doing, being flexible positionally. But Alontae Taylor's going to have the best opportunity out of any of them because he's going to start. I mean, he could start right out the gate.
Most intriguing storyline in the SEC in 2022, 81% are going Jimbo versus Saban. 13% say Brian Kelly at LSU. 4% say it's UGA defending the title. Only 2% are interested in Billy Napier at Florida.
How long Brian Harsin survives, I went off the board on that one. Just after what a weird year it has been for him. What a weird last 6 months it's been for Brian Harsin. That is the one that I'm most curious about.
What is the best Steve Spurrier quote of all time when he essentially came out and told Jimbo Fisher to spot the lie when discussing Nick Saban's comments about A&M's recruiting class? This is a great one. James Brown submits, when he commented on a fire at an Auburn library that destroyed 20 books, Spurrier quipped, the real tragedy was 15 of them hadn't been colored yet.
That can't be real.
Rube goes with the classic that you can't spell citrus without UT. Yeah. Daniel says, in 12 years at Florida, I don't think we ever signed a kid from the state of Alabama. Of course, we found out later that the scholarship they were giving out at Alabama was worth a whole lot more than ours.
Steve Spurrier, always good for a quote. May have no idea. I bet he has zero idea of what the name, image, and likeness stuff looks like right now to be a modern-day NFL or a college football head coach, but he's still going to take a shot anyway.
Back in the day, he called FSU Free Shoes University when he was the coach at Florida. I remember that, or that was in the 90s. I think that prompted a response from Bobby Bowden at the time. My personal favorite that nobody has submitted was when he asked about Kentucky and basically was scouting Kentucky with the media before a South Carolina-Kentucky game. They got a hell of a punter.
So disrespectful. Why can't more coaches be like Steve Spurrier? We're getting close with Jimbo and Nick, but now as Greg Sankey said, no, cut it out.
And who gets signed first, Odell Beckham or Julio Jones? 67% say it's Beckham.
Man, I don't know. I think that's a pretty good draw. But, based on the reporting, it sounds like he's in a good spot with the ACL recovery, even though that happened very, very late in the year, or I guess early in the year, this January. Those the polls?
Those are the polls.
That's the show. Do it again tomorrow. Nicholas Petit Frere, a lot of Titans talk. Blaine and Mickey got you covered. Coming up next.